Hello Year 1. So we have finished our first class book. It took us quite a while to get through, didn't it? And then I was thinking about a second book, and I have chosen a book that was the book that really first got my children really into reading. They couldn't find their feet. They didn't really know what kind of books they liked. And I remembered that I had read this book when I was a teenager, and I'd read it to my little brother and sister to get them into reading. And it's so funny and so silly and so adventurous that it made them want to read more. So I thought I would read it to you, and then perhaps when you go to the library or if you're ordering books, you could order it to read. It's a really good start, I think, to starting to read chapter books. So this is The Rover Adventures. There's 3 books in here. We'll just start with the first one, and it's a Roddy Doyle, and it is so funny and so silly. So let's go. It is called The Giggler Treatment. So I want you to have a little look at that picture there. And then let's have a little think. So this book is called The Giggler Treatment. What on earth could that mean? What is a giggler? What's the treatment? Are the gigglers doing the treating? Or do you get treatment for having a giggler? Have a think about that. Right. Chapter 1. So we see a picture here of a garden. There's a nice wall, a pathway in a town. And here comes somebody merrily skipping along. He seems very happy there. Okay. Chapter 1. Mr. Mac was walking to the train station. It was a nice sunny morning. The birds in the trees were singing their favourite song, and the breeze that blew was full of breakfast smells: bacon, eggs, frogs' legs and cabbage. Ooh, yum, said Mr. Mac to himself. Mr. Mac was feeling happy. Mr. Mac was feeling very happy. He had a nice lunch in his lunchbox and a surprise in his flask, and his children's goodbye kisses were still tickling his cheeks. He was going to work, and he liked his job. Actually, Mr. Mac loved his job. He was a biscuit tester in a biscuit factory. It was his job to make sure that the biscuits had the right amount of chocolate if they were supposed to have chocolate. And he measured them to make sure that they were exactly square. And if they were supposed to be square, or exactly round if they were supposed to be round. Best of all, he tasted them. Not all of them. He tasted 3 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon to make sure that they tasted exactly right. He was looking forward to work today because he was going to be testing his favourite biscuits of all time, fig rolls. Oh, I love fig rolls. The factory made 365 types of biscuits, a different biscuit for every day of the year. Mr. Mac liked most of these biscuits, and he loved some of them, but fig rolls always came top of his list. He loved their shape, he loved their smell, he loved their intelligence. They were such clever biscuits. They were delicious without needing any help from chocolate, and today was a fig roll testing day. So Mr. Mac was one happy man. But on his way to the station, just after he'd turned the corner, he saw a seagull sitting on the branch of a tree. "Do you know what, mister?" said the seagull. "I hate fish." There we go. Got the seagull in the tree there. And there's Mr. Mac with his lunchbox, looking a little bit confused. "I didn't know seagulls could perch in trees," said Mr. Mac. He kept walking, but he looked back to have another look at the seagull. And this was a pity, because he didn't see the dog poo right in front of him on the footpath. Oh, poor Mr. Mac. His shoe was heading straight for that poo. There he is walking along. Chapter 2. So what? So what? Yes. So what? People stand on dog poo all the time. Even dogs stand on dog poo now and again. But it was huge. It was a big pile of wet, fresh Dog poo. It was probably the biggest pile of poo in the world. Big dog, big poo. So what? I'm bored. I'm going to skip a few pages to see if there's any more about biscuits. Wait! The story isn't about biscuits and it isn't about the poo. The story is about the people who put the poo on the path so that Mr. Mac would stand on it. The people who put it there. It was dog poo, so it came out of a dog, right? Right. So a dog stopped on the path outside the train station. He stayed there for a little while and left the poo before he ran away, right? Wrong. It was dog poo, but it wasn't a dog that put it there. And this story is about the little people who did put it there just 10 seconds before Mr. Mac turned the corner. Oh, how strange. I wonder what these little people are called. Chapter 3. 4 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps. Mr. Mac had seen enough of the seagull. He was going to turn around in plenty of time to see the poo, but the seagull spoke again. Fish, said the seagull. Don't talk to me about fish. 4 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps, 1. Mr. Mac's left foot was right over the dog stuff. The bottom of his shoe was exactly 16.5 inches from the peak of the poo. And Mr. Mac thought that he had heard Giggles. And he was right. He had heard giggles like these. The poo was in the middle of the path. The path was beside a garden wall, and the gigglers were on the other side of the wall, hidden behind it. There were 3 of them. They were all standing on the crossbar of a rusty old bike that had been leaning against the wall for more than 20 years. The bike was so old it had almost become part of the wall. The gigglers had watched Mr. Mac as he got nearer to the poo. They had counted the steps. How many? 4. How many now? 3. How many now? 2. They heard the seagull talking to Mr. Mac and they ducked behind the wall as Mr. Mac walked right up to the poo. How many now? 1. They waited. I don't know if you can see it there. It's quite a light drawing, but there's a garden wall and you can see just on top 1, 2, 3 little heads with pointy ears. Okay, this is why I love this book, because it's so silly. So this chapter is called a chapter that isn't really a chapter because nothing really happens in it, but we'll call it Chapter 4. Nothing happens in this chapter, but some of the questions that are probably hopping about in your head get answered, like this one. Why? Why what? Why did the gigglers put the poo on the path? Ooh, good question. They did it because of something Mr. Mac had done the night before he was walking to the train station. But I'll tell you all about it later because these chapters where nothing happens gets boring very quickly. Now, back to the story. Chapter 5, which probably should be called Chapter 4, but let's just call it Chapter 5. There's a picture of a train station. Back at the train station, the gigglers waited. They waited for the wallop, Mr. Mac hitting the poo. They waited for the squelch, Mr. Mac stepping down on the poo. They waited for the gasp, oh, Mr. Mac seeing the poo for the first time. They waited for the groan, oh, Mr. Mac seeing that most of the poo was now on his shoe. His shoe was now very, very close to the you-know-what. How close? Said the smallest giggler. 14 3/4 inches, said the biggest giggler. Oh, that's very close, said the middle-sized one. And she shoved her fist into her mouth to trap her giggles. And they waited. Chapter 6, which should probably be called Chapter 5, it's another one of these chapters where nothing much happens except for one very exciting thing at the end. More questions like this one. Who are the gigglers? Good question. The gigglers look after children and they do it very well. But they do it so quietly that hardly anybody has ever seen them. How do they look after children? Good question. They follow them everywhere. To school, to the shops, to the park, back home again, upstairs, into the toilet, all over the place, everywhere the children go. The gigglers are always near, always looking after them. What do they look like? Good question. Only a few people have ever seen the gigglers and they never tell anyone else about them, so it's hard to tell what the gigglers look like. They are baby-sized and furry. Their fur changes colour as they move. Like a chameleon? Yes, like a chameleon. If they are near a white wall, they become white. If they are in a tree, they become green and brown. If they're near a car, well, it depends on the colour of the car, but they're not very good at being purple, so they try not to go too near to purple cars. Why do they follow the children? Another good question. They follow the children to make sure that adults are being fair to them. Parents, teachers, aunties, shopkeepers, all adults. If they are mean to the children, they get the giggler treatment. If they send a child to bed without their supper, or if they frighten a child, they get the giggler treatment. If they are dishonest to the child, so dishonest means if they fib or if they lie. If they are dishonest to the children, if they say give a child fish and say it's chicken, or if they ever trump and they blame the child for it, they get the giggler treatment. If they're ever rude to a child or make them wear clothes that they hate, they get the giggler treatment. What is the giggler treatment? Poo on the shoe. What happens then? The adults keep getting the treatment every day, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times, until they stop being mean to the child. Have the gigglers always done this? Yes. Since the beginning of time, the gigglers have always been there. Since the very first dog did its very first poo. Since the first caveman grunted at his first cave child, he stomped out of the cave straight onto a huge lump of prehistoric poo. That's a funny picture. Can you see? There's a grumpy caveman there standing in a massive pile of cave poo. The Roman Emperor Nero hated children. He ordered his guard to catch all the children and feed them to the lions. And then he stood on a dollop of lion poo. There were more lions than dogs in ancient Rome. Many years later, a saint called Patrick was busy driving all the snakes out of Ireland. A little boy called Elvis O'Leary, who loved snakes, asked Patrick to stop, but Patrick pushed him out of his way and walked straight onto a little hill of hot poo that only seconds before had been inside an Irish wolfhound called Bran. St. Patrick got rid of all the snakes, but he never got rid of the smell. 2 minutes after the Titanic hit an iceberg, a woman on the deck shouted, "Quick, quick, the children will drown." "Good," said a man, "there'll be more room in the lifeboats." And he stepped onto a hill of the slimiest green dog poo and slid off the deck straight into the sea. "Oh, mummy," he roared, "I forgot me water wings." So you see, the gigglers have been doing this work for thousands of years. All this time they've been giving the treatment to men and women who are mean to children. How was Mr. Mac mean to his children? How was Mr. Mac mean to his children? Good question. And the answer is coming up soon. But now we'll go on to the next chapter. What about the very exciting thing at the end of this chapter? Oh yes, I nearly forgot. Whilst I was telling you all about the gigglers, a woman who was walking in a park in Bombay nearly stood on a snail. That wasn't exciting. Well, the snail thought it was. Right, I'm going to stop there at chapter 7, which should probably be called chapter 5, but let's call it chapter 7. I'll stop there. I wonder if you could draw a picture of the gigglers. So we've had some descriptions of the gigglers. We saw the top of their head, their little spiky ears, and we know that they're tiny and they are furry and they change colour. So perhaps you could draw a picture of a giggler, and you could maybe do a picture of a car or where they might be hiding, and we could see if we can spot them. You can send them to me. Okay? hope you enjoyed that.